Large three-row crossover SUVs are great for families and other people who just want to carry a lot of people and stuff, and GMC has kind of played in an interesting space with the Acadia since it came out. Now they're here for 2024 with the all-new one. This is the 2024 GMC Acadia Denali, and it's back to being pretty large. This is Out Motorsports, the channel for cars as you are. My name is Jake, and if you're a size queen, the new GMC Acadia Denali might be for you. Now, I know these aren't the most exciting segment of vehicles, but they play a key role in everyone's profitability and in a lot of people's day-to-day lives. And honestly, the Acadia has at least sort of an interesting story going back to its inception. So I know you're dying to hear the whole story of the Acadia, so let's just get right into it. So the GMC Acadia, it doesn't sound that interesting on the surface. It's another three-row crossover, but if you think back to the Great Recession days, 2007, 2008, GM came out with their Lambda triplets. They replaced their minivans with these vehicles, so they had to be good and they had to be large, you know, to haul 3 rows of people and all their stuff. And at the time, that was the Chevy Traverse, the GMC Acadia, the Buick Enclave, and the Saturn Outlook, for those who remember Saturn. And all those vehicles were the same shape, they were the same length, they were the same size. So those were all 201 inches long on a 119-inch wheelbase. And I bring that up because GMC will tell you that this Acadia, the third generation Acadia, is so much bigger than it was before. And it is, but they shrunk it for the second generation. So it's bigger than the second gen by a good bit, but it's also bigger than the first gen, but only by a touch. So what did they do for the second gen? Well, they chopped 7.5 inches overall out of it, and they chopped a bunch of wheelbase out of it as well. They wanted to play in a slightly different part of the segment, and they apparently at the time said their customers wanted that, and the dealers wanted something to sell that was that size and all that good stuff. But anyway, for the third generation, this guy here, this 2024, this is on a new platform that also underpins the new Chevy Traverse and Buick Enclave, and they added a bunch of wheelbase, they added a bunch of length back to it. They added 10.6 inches of overall length, so it is longer than the first gen by just a touch, and they added a bunch of wheelbase back to it as well. And the wheelbase on this is actually 120.9 inches, which is the exact same as a short wheelbase GMC Yukon. So that is interesting to me. Go into that in just a second, but it's the same wheelbase as a Yukon. It is shorter overall than a Yukon by about 7 inches, and we'll talk about where you kind of get some of that size difference there. But as a reminder, the Yukon is a body-on-frame SUV that is meant to tow things while hauling a bunch of people, or tow things without a bunch of people, whatever. It's meant to be a little more flexible in the towing and hauling segment, whereas this is going to be much more people focused. So this is unibody. This has a smaller turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, whereas the Yukon has a big V8 or a diesel, and they just play in different swimming pools altogether, to be totally honest. So this is a 2.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder. It is an all-new engine making 328 horsepower and 326 pound-feet of torque. Now, that all sounds very healthy on the surface. The turbo should help with low-end grunt, all that sort of stuff. This does replace the 3.6 liter V6 that was so common across a lot of GM vehicles in their prior generations. So we'll talk about how that all works in the driving segment here in just a second, but that is paired to a 9-speed torque converter automatic, optional all-wheel drive. In this case, the Denali has it, and that's going to be a front-biased all-wheel drive system with a selectable all-wheel drive mode to kind of force it to lock up a little bit earlier. But it's a front-wheel drive based system here. If you get the GMC Acadia AT4, that's going to be a little more off-road focused in a lot of ways, and the rear end of the all-wheel drive system is going to be a little bit more robust for more off-road focused use. Now, these, of course, are not going to be super hardcore off-roaders. If you want that, you've got something like the GMC Canyon AT4 or AT4X. Now, I mentioned with the Yukon, those are rated for much more weight for the sake of towing, but these do hold their own in the segment. They're rated for 5,000 pounds, which is pretty typical for something this size, and with a wheelbase this long, it should be pretty stable. Now, we're not going to tow in this video. I almost did, and my plans to do it kind of fell through. I'm buying a terrible old project car here in a little bit, and I thought I'd go get it with this, and then I didn't. So anyway, still have some thoughts on how it might tow, and we'll try and grab another one for towing in the future. So that's kind of it mechanically with the 2024 Acadia Denali. Like I said, the Acadia AT4 gets some other different bits on it, including suspension differences, wheels, tires, that sort of thing. So we're not going to talk about that today, just the Denali. They do have the more basic model, the Elevation, which again, I'm not going to talk about in its entirety because they do all share the same drivetrain, but there are some differences with the Elevation as well. Now, this one has the Denali Reserve package on it for some extra luxury, and that adds these 22-inch wheels, which I honestly think are fabulous looking. They are really, really sharp. I think the car in general looks really good. It's very handsome. It's going to age well. Nice clean lines. The front end is definitely oops all grill, but in a way that I think kind of works. And I just like it. I think it looks really nice. Now, they have some nice colors. I wouldn't buy this in black, but a Denali black looks good on, so I get it. They want to show off all the trim, all the accoutrement. But with that Denali Reserve package, you get these wheels. You also get a performance suspension. It's going to be a fixed rate suspension, so no adaptive shocks, no mag ride, no airbags, no nothing. It's just a pretty simple setup, but slightly firmer dampers and or slightly higher spring rates. The brakes are not going to be upgraded. It's all going to be the same sort of setup compared to the other ones that you get, but we do have the different suspension and the different wheels and tires. What that means is we're going to have a bigger wheel with a smaller tire sidewall, which could impact the ride. So we'll talk about all that here in the driving portion in just a second, but let me show you the interior because it is also all new for 2024. All right, so let's start with the interior. Up here in the front of the 2024 Acadia Denali, you see you've got these Denali embroidered seats right here. This is going to be a real leather seat, and in this case, it's a two-tone brown and cream color, which I really, really dig. You've got some contrasting stitching. These are nice seats, and they are pretty comfortable. I've done a lot of road tripping in this car, and they've proven to be very nice. If you look further down here on the driver's seat, you do have lumbar support that goes in and out and up and down, which is a nice touch. One other thing I really love is these floor mats. I know it sounds silly, but they're kind of a Berber carpet material, and they're really just a nice touch here again on the Denali. Now let's go ahead and hop in, show you the rest. Already got it running for you. And if we pull out here, you're going to see this is your new steering wheel. Now this has SuperCruise, so this up here I'll talk about in the driving portion, but this is a light bar that comes on, so this is key to using SuperCruise. Now looking here at the steering wheel in particular, it's nice and chunky, nice grippy. This is a good thickness. It's not too crazy, not too spindly. And over here on the left, you've got an interesting mix of buttons for your cruise control and also your transmission, because this is the button to engage the low range. It's not really a gear, and that's because your transmission shifter is now moved to the column. So this is going to be similar to what you find in other GM vehicles moving forward. This is similar to what Mercedes-Benz and Tesla use as well. If you put your foot on the brake, you just pull forward and then go up or down to get into reverse or drive. And then the button on the end goes into park. Now the issue is that you don't have another position for low, which engages your paddle shifters that you have here and here. So they have to put something somewhere. So they put the L button on the steering wheel, which seems kind of goofy, but in reality it works pretty nicely if you're on a back road or something and want to engage a lower gear. Just hit the button and then hit the minus paddle. Now, looking at the rest of the steering wheel, over here you've got controls for your heated steering wheel. This controls what you see on the gauge screen, and then you've got some other little infotainment and phone call options. On the back of the steering wheel, you do have toggles for your volume and your track selection, which is nice. They're kind of convenient and hidden out of the way. Typical wiper stalk, very GM, where they put all the controls on one thing. You got your washer fluid here and your different wiper intervals, your high beams and turn signals. Now looking over here on the left by my knee, there's some other little buttons here. This is going to be for your parking brake. This is your drive modes. This is that button that makes the all-wheel drive behave a little differently. This thankfully disables the auto start stop, and then you've got your brightness for your screens in the cabin. Over here on the door panel, 2-position memory for your driver's seat, and you've got some nice wood going on the door panel, some chrome. This is all very, very nice, makes a nice impression. And then typical controls for your mirrors and your windows. Now, one interesting thing here is you've got one touch down for all 4 windows, but the only one that is one touch up is the driver's side. And then if you look further down, you've got a control here to pop the rear hatch. You have to use that while you're in park. Now, looking further up, I mentioned you can change this gauge cluster screen. Every Acadia is going to get this screen, and you've got a couple different views here. So I like this one where you've got a big tack and some trip information and your audio. But if you'd like to change that, you can pull up your maps. This is using the built-in navigation of the car that runs on Google, or you can pull up Apple CarPlay. If you use it, it will run Apple Maps here as well. The other option is to see some things related to SuperCruise, which I kind of don't care about because I can look out the windshield and see where the cars are in relation to myself. So This is the view I like, but those are your options. Now moving over here to the center stack, this is where the party really starts. This is your 15-inch touchscreen, which I hate big touchscreens. If you've been on this channel for a long time, I think screens are kind of an answer that we don't necessarily need for everything in the world, but in this case GM has been doing a nice job with them in all of their newer cars, and this is no exception. So this runs on Google's Android Automotive operating system, so it runs the entire show. It is not Android Auto that your phone would run if you have a Google phone, but it runs the back end of the car. Now the nice thing is the hardware is very good, the screen is incredibly high quality, it's all very snappy. This is going to be your kind of basic tiled view, so you've got some persistent stuff up here at the top. You can hit home and that brings up all your different kind of apps and settings and controls here. This is the tile view, and then you can have little shortcuts. So this I've got just for maps at a larger scale, or I can go into CarPlay. Now, I've been using the built-in Google Maps because it works really well and it just looks really nice in the car, but if you want, you can have CarPlay up, no big deal. Now looking further down, they do have some hard controls, which yay, we love physical controls. These are going to be all for your climate. This entire bottom piece is persistent all the time, so these items that you see down here, on, off, auto, your temperature, your fan speed, and your defrost are controlled by these nice big toggles. This I like a lot because this is very easy to deal with while you are driving. These buttons up here for sync, for your heated and ventilated seat, that sort of thing, these are all touch controls. The one quirky thing about this one, if you hit the heated and ventilated seat button, it doesn't pop up the menu right down here, it puts it up here, which I find kind of odd, but in any case, that's what it is. And then these controls here, a couple commonly used items. So in this case, you've got your lane keep, you've got your auto high beams, and then you have your headlights, which I continue to hate being in the touch screen. This is something that I just think is ridiculous. I don't know why they did it. I know GM has answers. They started this in the Chevy Colorado and GMC Canyon, and it is very, very bad because if you forget to turn the headlights off and you get out of the car, well, the screen has turned itself off. Now you have to turn the car back on to turn the headlights off, which is a waste of time and kind of ridiculous. Also, if you're going for the lights because it's raining or because you're towing or because it's dusky or you're on the highway, why do I need to fumble through a touchscreen for that? I think that is a control that should always be a physical control, and I will say that until I'm blue in the face. It is a bad idea to have headlights through a touchscreen, but they've done it. In any case, if you take a look back over here, you've also got this control right here that brings up some other frequently used items, so you can control your HUD, your power window locks, your park assist. You can do all this, and it's fine. I just am so irritated by the whole headlight thing. In any case, the cameras I want to bring up as a high point because they are incredibly high quality. You've got a ton of different views here, and they are just very nice and easy and very crisp. So something that every manufacturer should take note of is just how nice and crisp these cameras are. Now if we pull back here, take a look at everything else, you do have a wireless phone charger right here. I'll move the key out of the way. You've got a USB-C and A port down here, and this is kind of rubberized. And then you've got two cup holders and a nice armrest with some stitching going on here, two different materials of leather or vinyl or whatever this is, and then some good storage. So you've got this bin that pulls out for some more storage in there. It's nice and deep. And then of course, looking over here, just a nice dashboard, some padded materials, some more wood. There's a strip of ambient lighting right here, and then your glove box. I'll fix that later. Looking further up here, you do have a digital rear view mirror if you like that. I like it sometimes and don't like it some other times, so thankfully it's easy to turn on and off. And then you've got controls for OnStar and your sunroof controls. Now this sunroof is a panoramic roof. It is gigantic and it runs all the way back to the end of the second row, and it lets in so much light. So this is your front row tour of the Acadia. We'll talk about the second and third rows here in just a second, but one thing I want to mention is with the materials, because some people have commented online that this doesn't look as premium as like a Volvo or something. And first of all, I don't think GMC and Volvo were playing in the same sandbox. But the other benefit here, I don't know if Volvo is really going for families in some cases, like with very little children. Probably they are, but regardless, the materials in here all come across as nice presenting, but also durable and most importantly, easy to clean. So yeah, it's not going to be quite as plush as something like a Volvo or an Audi. I don't think I would compare GMC to a Volvo or an Audi, but the materials feel appropriate for what this car is and for the price point. And speaking of price point, $64,000 for this loaded Acadia Denali. Let's get in the second row and talk about that. All right, so second row, we've got two bucket seats right here. They each have their armrests on the sides that fold down for the center inboard portion, and then of course your armrest on the door panel itself. Now looking out here, this does have two more cup holders back here. You've got climate for the second and third rows and heated seats. So you can control this from the touchscreen up there, which is great. Now let's take a look at the amount of legroom. I have a ton of legroom here. I'm 6'1". These seats are all the way back, but look at this. This is fantastic. Now you can grab under the seat right here, slide it up so you can still have good legroom, but give people in the third row a little bit more. Now, I mentioned that panoramic roof goes all the way above my head here. There are some vents in the ceiling. No roll-up window shades, which is fine. I don't really mind it, but if you care about that, you're not going to have it. And then, of course, the seat does recline if you want that. So generally very comfortable. I've had friends back here in the second row and in the third row, and all of us as adults, as grown men, said that this car was comfortable in all three rows. So that is really fantastic. Now let's head back to the third row. I'm going to go ahead and climb back here. And one benefit of this versus a Yukon is that the floor ends up being a little bit lower because it's unibody, not body on frame. I'll go ahead and squeeze myself back here. Now this is going to be a little bit more of a tight fit, at least for my legs. I could have the second row passenger put the seat further up just a touch and it would be a little better. We'd all fit as 3 6-footers. But in any case, I do have good headroom. You can see my head's not touching the ceiling, which is really fantastic as a 6-footer in the third row of one of these cars. There's also vents on the ceiling, which is great to keep me comfortable back here on a hot day. There's also a USB-C port on either side of the third row here. And then you've got a square cup holder and a bigger kind of rectangular cup holder near your armrest. Now this allegedly seats 3 back here. I think if you've got 3 adults back here, they'll be a little unhappy. So probably 6 adults, 7 if you've got some kids. One thing I do want to mention, this back window is fine, but there's a lot of pillar going on right by my head. I know they've got an airbag back here, and that's fine, but it does feel a little dark compared to the front 2 rows of the car. And then looking back at the cargo area, you know, this is all fine and good. It's plenty enough of cargo space for one of these 3-row crossovers. You're not going to get a bunch more based on packaging for really any of them, but I think that's where you're going to get a touch more with something like the Yukon, because that's where that extra 7 inches goes. So with all that, let's get behind the wheel and talk about how it drives, because I think this is actually pretty decent if you care about how a crossover drives. If you're an enthusiast like we tend to be on this channel, I think it's pretty all right. All right, so the 2024 Acadia Denali. So first things first, I think I like this as a car that for people that care about driving, which is interesting coming from GMC that's kind of been a truck brand. And the reason I like it is because everything is kind of firm. It's not very wallowy. It's not any of that, which we'll get to here in just a second. But let's go ahead and get on the interstate. That involves this little curvy on-ramp, and the suspension here is nice and buttoned up. It's confidence inspiring. There's zero feel to the steering. It's heavy, but it's not got a lot of feel, but it's easy to place the car regardless, which I like. So that feels pretty good. The suspension, being that performance suspension, is fairly buttoned up, and the ride is good without being punishing. But again, not wallowy, not soft. Now, the one thing that I don't like about this car, and I'm gonna slow down and then punch it. I just punch! Is the engine for the sake of the noise. So if I go ahead and floor it here. Punch it, Margaret! It sounds like my coffee grinder. And look, I just don't, I don't like the drivetrain. It's the transmission part of it's fine. The engine in this is okay. It's all new for this car and the Traverse and the Enclave, and GM's gonna hate the fact that I'm like, oh, I don't even like it. It makes enough power and torque. It doesn't sound good. Most people won't notice or care, but when you get it revving higher, I'd say 3,500 RPM and up, it's coarse. And for something that costs this much, I just don't like the sound that it makes. If it was a hybrid, that would help. Or if it was a bigger engine, like I said, these came with a V6 in their prior generations, that would also help. Now, they're downsizing for the sake of fuel economy. It's nice to have boost off the line, all that good stuff. but for being 320 something horsepower, 330 horsepower, it doesn't feel especially quick, especially with other people in it. I've had 3 friends in here with me, and it doesn't feel fast. It isn't fast. It's about 4,700, 4,800 pounds before you put you and your friends in it. And the engine's just not doing it for me. And they downsized, for the sake of fuel economy, and it's not doing great on fuel economy. It's rated at 24 miles per gallon on the highway and 19 in the city for the all-wheel drive model, which this is. My average after doing almost 500 miles of mostly highway driving in this car is 22. And I mean, fine. It's better than a Yukon will do with the 5.3, but that's not great for a brand new 2024 vehicle. And I think if they had a hybrid, that would help a lot. Or frankly, if they'd kept the V6, because this 4-cylinder always feels kind of strung out. It's always working pretty hard. And that's where I get irritated by the coarseness, because like I said, at lower RPMs, we're at 1400 right now. You don't notice it. Great, we're cruising on the highway, but when you are working it, which you are a lot of the time given how large the vehicle is, I don't like the sound, and it doesn't feel especially punchy. So not my favorite as far as the drivetrain goes, which is a shame because I really like this car otherwise. It drives really nicely. Everything, the way it's calibrated, the steering, the throttle pedal input, the brake pedal, the suspension, all of it is great. They've really nailed it. I think it is a fabulous car otherwise as far as something to drive. I like how the brake pedal bite is. There's some good initial bite to it. It gives you a lot of confidence, and as you go through the pedal to slow the car down, it still feels really, really healthy, really, really strong. The steering, like I said, doesn't have a ton of feedback to it, but it's nicely weighted. It's fine for what this kind of car is, and then I said the ride also is pretty good. Otherwise, you've got good visibility. This is a nice low dashboard. You've got big windows. You can really see out of the car pretty well. The cameras help. This is a big car. It's worth mentioning, I said the wheelbase is the same as a GMC Yukon. It's only 7 inches shorter. You feel every bit of the size. However, the trade-off, like I mentioned, is you can put 6-foot tall people in all 3 rows and everyone is comfortable. So for a car that is that big, I'm trying to give the perspective of how big this thing really is. It drives really nicely. So I do appreciate that. And then also worth mentioning is SuperCruise. Like I said, that is the killer app for this car, and every other GM product that offers it. It is so good. I've done with all GM products I've driven probably 2,500 or 3,000 miles with my hands on my lap, and it works so well. We did a road trip here in this car, just not a super crazy one, but still, everywhere that you know where it knows the road, you just hit the button on the steering wheel, you get the green light, and it's hands-free. There you go. And it will do it up to 85 miles an hour. It does a great job with automatic lane changes. It does work with a trailer if you've got one hooked up. And it just, if you do a lot of road trips, that is, I think, the killer feature. It's something that no one else has in this capacity. A lot of other people have level 2 driver assistance, and Kia and Hyundai in particular have some really great stuff with their systems, but this is LiDAR mapped highways, and it is the most precise and the safest system that I think, based on how they've got it set up. So really, really love that they offer it here on the Acadia and not just on the bigger vehicles now. Now, I mentioned towing with SuperCruise, all that. I'll try and do it all on a different video, but I want to talk about towing and my theory with towing with this car, because I was going to put 5,000 pounds on it against the 5,000 pound trailer rating, and it's got the wheelbase for it. Same wheelbase as a shorty Yukon, right? 121 inches long, more or less. Stability wise would be no problem. I think it would ride great, mind your tongue weight, all that good stuff. You'd be totally fine. Trailer brakes, it'll stop fine. I'm really not worried about any of that. I don't know if I'd want to tow 5,000 pounds with this engine. It will do it, but I guarantee you it will be slow, it will be loud and coarse, like I mentioned, and I just don't think it would feel very pleasant. This class of vehicle, I've seen a lot of people tow campers more often than not with them, and I've seen people tow race cars and track cars here and there if you have an aluminum trailer. That's kind of how you're going to get against that limit, not be over it. But I think it would do it. I just don't think it would be very pleasant, because it would just be working so hard, and it works pretty hard as it is without something hanging off the back. So that's just something that I want to try it for the sake of actually saying for sure, but it doesn't get me super excited, whereas something like a Kia Telluride does a nice job. A Pathfinder does a nice job, but those have big V6s, and this does not. Now we're sitting in traffic here, so we can talk about slower speed sort of stuff. This is all very nice in the city. You don't notice the engine because it's not working nearly as hard here. Kind of mushes its way through the gears. It's very pleasant. Again, the ride is a little more on the firm side versus cushy, but it is still totally fine in a city environment with streets like this. I'm not really having a bad time here. It's very, very nice. And again, good visibility, easy city car to drive, easy to parallel park. You do have the park assist. I just kind of like doing it myself, but it all works totally fine. And this infotainment system is very pleasant to use while you're on the move, generally. Like I said, I don't like how the heated and ventilated seat controls are arranged because they're kind of weird to deal with while you're moving. But otherwise, it's just easy, it's snappy, it's generally well thought out, and there's plenty of real buttons going on that make this all less of a hassle. This is easy to deal with. It is Google based, like I said, so you do have some subscription fees eventually. They've got, you know, it's free for a certain number of years, and then you will have to pay to keep it all running, but it's perhaps worth it. I hate subscription fees, but I think for how well connected the car is and how nicely it all works, it's probably worth it. And again, SuperCruise, you know, that's free for the first few years, but then you have to pay for that. Absolutely worth it if you take a lot of road trips. So overall, really, really pleased with what they've got here. You do also have the Chevy Traverse and the Buick Enclave on this platform with the same drivetrain. Of course, the options are going to be different based on what you pick. The one thing where I think this could be a touch improved, which the Buick will be, I think, is in the sound deadening category. It's a touch noisy compared to what it could be, but it's totally within acceptable limits. It's not annoying. It's just something that you might notice if you really have a tuned ear. If you've blown your eardrums out listening to Pink Pony Club on repeat, then you won't notice at all. But other than that, this is well put together. If you can handle the coarseness of the engine, or if you really like your Ninja coffee grinder, then you're gonna be just fine. It is a well thought out vehicle. It is a great car, I think, for families. If you're looking for that, you can move the second row seats with a child seat in place. Not something I have any experience in or practice with, but other people online have said that you can do it, which is a great feature, so you're not constantly taking stuff in and out. And it's buttoned up. It's going to age well styling wise. It's very well thought through. I'm really impressed with what they got here. It's a very well done large crossover, and you know, these are everyone's bread and butter right now. We're not doing minivans in a great capacity, so this, if you're looking to move a lot of people and stuff, has to be good. And I really think GMC has generally hit the nail on the head and understood the assignment. Do I love the engine? No. Other than that, I do really like it. So those are my thoughts on the 2024 GMC Acadia Denali. Thank you as always for coming along here. Please be sure to subscribe right here on YouTube. Give us a follow on Facebook and Instagram. And head over to outmotorsports.com. We've got a bunch of events coming up throughout this year. We're already planning stuff for next year. And we've got all these communities across the country of other LGBT car enthusiasts who would love to get to know you and be your best friends. So head over there, join our membership program. We'll see you on Discord and Facebook for that. Till next time, please stay safe, be well. See you for the next one.